Hi everybody, I'm Rich Lewis and welcome to You've Only Come to Hear United. So today I'm going to be pleading with Ruben Amorim to not make the same mistakes as Erik Ten Hag. Now, getting straight into it. May 23, got the tablet with me by the way if I'm looking down because I've got some quotes to read today. So May 2023, Erik Ten Hag says, I can't play like Ajax because I have different players. I came here with my philosophy based on possession, but I wanted to combine it with the DNA of Manchester United, the players and their characters. I want to emphasise more on going direct. I noticed when I put that down, the contradiction between he came here with his possession-based philosophy, but at Man United he wants to go more direct. Okay. October 23. The football that we played at Ajax, we will never play here. I have different players now, and it's also not the reason that I came here. The collection of players you have available determines your style of play, and that is why we play here in a different manner than I have at Ajax. And I will have to, because I cannot play here in the same way. And that is also entirely not in the DNA of Manchester United. The Ajax style of football is very characteristic, and here we will be playing a lot more direct. And that is what we have players for, especially in the forefront of the pitch. So that was what Erik Ten Hag said back in 2023. Now, we've seen Ruben Amorim over the past week say something very, very similar. Now, he came out and said, I already said previously, you cannot transport one reality into another. At Manchester United, you cannot play exactly like this. You cannot play so defensively, and so there we will have to adapt. It will be a completely different world, a different team. We won't have that much time to train, and we will begin from a different starting point. Now, before we get more into that, let's jump back to what Erik Ten Hag said. Erik Ten Hag had previously said. Now, what went wrong for him? There are 3 points here for me. First of all, the first point is actually, it kind of made sense what he said. You come into the club, you've got different players. You know, you've just done something with a particular team. So at first, yeah, you're going to have to adapt because, you might not be able to take what you did at one place and when you were successful because you don't have the resources to do that. So in the initial phases of Erik Ten Hag's time at Manchester United, I think the fans understood that, we know it's not going to be an overnight thing. You've done this one, you've had this really great period of success and we want to see you try and emulate that here. No, we get that. That's fine. Secondly, he then signed over the course of the next couple of years previous Ajax players, other players he had an affiliation with, players who maybe had that grounding in sort of the Dutch school of football, players who you would have thought would have fitted in quite nicely at the Ajax team he had previously. And then nothing happened. What seemed to happen, even going into this season, was the same as what had been happening before. I think he did try to make a transition the second season to the first. I think there were more compromises in the first season, such as De Gea kicking it long. But you'd have thought with Ten Hag getting more of the players he wanted, because he's got a lot of players there now that came in under his watch, that would have allowed him to play the type of football that made him so successful before. Now, what frustrates me is he obviously quite early on, because we're looking back in 2023 when a lot of these comments came out now, and there've been obviously a couple, there've been windows since then. He had decided that he was going to play a different way, and then ended up bringing in the players to sort of suit this maybe new idea of playing that he created. But if the reason originally was that he couldn't replicate what he wanted to do at Ajax and Man United because the players weren't there, then why did you not just use the windows that came afterwards to bring in the players to allow you to play a way that made you so successful? Not just in the Eredivisie, because I understand that's a different league and maybe it's not going to translate into the Premier League, but he did really well, especially the one season, obviously, in the Champions League, beating some of the, the best teams out there, including Real Madrid. So I've never been able to get my head around that. And thirdly, why was it such a bad thing for him to take this approach? Because it could have worked, and we saw it didn't. But for me, it was because he was abandoning his success. Why would you abandon that yourself? Like, in terms of where his head was at, I understand your thinking. You're going to have to adjust to the Premier League, but you're going to get resources. We saw that over the past few years. The money was there for him. He spent a lot of money, You brought in players who had actually directly played under you for Ajax before. So the argument about you not having the players to play a certain way, if you can't coach, even like 4 or 5 of the existing United players to play in the way you want them to play, there's something wrong there. You should only have to bring in, maybe 4 or 5 players to complement the bunch you have. In my opinion, anyway, if you're a manager worth your salt, you're going to be able to at least retrain some of the players you have to play a certain way. And you've got your Onanas coming in, Martinez coming in to play out from the back. To this season, obviously, you've gone to an extra level. You've got De Ligt who's coming there too. You've had players who, I know I'm missing some there, but other players have come into this side. Well, obviously Anthony being the outstanding one, who's been a huge disappointment for us too, but had been playing in that's quite a successful side for Ajax too. So that's never really sat comfortably with me. And now, off the back of that, if we come then back to what Amorim said, why is Amorim wrong? So 3 reasons here. First of all, before I go into this, you could look at what Amorim said before you go into what is wrong and go, well, it's the same thing of what I was just saying about Erik Ten Hag. That you're coming from a different country, you're looking at the players you've got and you're going, right, I can't replicate this exactly because I don't have the players to do this. It's taking me a while to build this up at Sporting, and it's going to be the same at Manchester United, etc., etc. Everything we just said about Erik Ten Hag. However, the difference here for me is we do have the players that are probably more suited to playing a 3 at the back system. I'm not going into the intricacies of the play, although from the videos that I've watched, and I'm sure a lot of you have watched out there, they do seem to tally up quite well with the talent that we do have. There's 1 or 2 positions where we could need strengthening, but 3 at the back will work. We've got more than enough defenders there. I think generally there's a few people saying different things, but I think a lot of people seem to be quite happy with the idea of De Ligt as a centre back in the middle with Maguire as backup, Martinez on the left with possibly Shaw as backup there, and then on the right side Yoro, and then you've got Evans, Lindelof, but some of the players we've already mentioned too could be backups there. And over time, perhaps we'll see. You'd hope to see people like Lindelof move on. Evans will probably, you'd imagine, retire after this season. You wouldn't put it past another year out there, but probably he shouldn't be on the right hand side of that anyway. You want someone with a bit more pace. There'll be transfers that'll be made. Then you've got the youth team too. People like Louis Jackson back there. There's going to be more coming through as well. So I think we're absolutely really well suited to play that. Probably some of these guys would be better in a back 3 than especially Maguire in a back 3 than a back 2. And then we're back 4. And then the wing backs position's a bit more debatable, but at the moment, we know Amorim can play sort of wingers in those positions too. Maybe the one and the other, winger one side, more of a full back defensive player the other side, or at least a traditional wing back that is. And we've got Dalot and Mazraoui who can play out there. I've seen some people not too hot on Mazraoui playing on the wing back position, which I don't understand personally. I still think he's got the engine, the stamina, and the attacking flair to do that. We've seen him playing attacking midfield recently too. And then we've got wingers who could be moved back. We don't know how successful that may be if Amorim does take that approach. So the players are there to do this. We've talked about this before too. Midfield, we're going to have to see how exposed they may look a la Ten Hag's midfield this season. Well, even going back to last season too. They're expected to do a lot of work from what I can tell if he uses that system. Ugarte and Mainu you'd expect to have got the legs forward, but outside of that, I think we've got some aging profiles in there. But he likes to promote youth, Amorim, and we've got some really talented young midfielders in that squad. Jack Fletcher's coming through. I think I'm not too hot on Jace Fitzgerald in terms of knowing where he plays exactly. I think he's a more attacking player, but I could be wrong. Put that in the comments if I am wrong. Sekou Kone is just coming too. I know there's a lot of hype around him and a lot of potential and promise there. So we've got players to come through who can play there as well. The 10s, we got a load of players who could play that role. If you're looking at them as more inverted forwards, particularly, we don't know how well they'll play, but in terms of him bringing the system in and us trying that, he's got players to try there. And up front, I think Højlund really fits the profile. People have been talking about how Gyökeres is a better player than Højlund. No idea. I don't know how you judge that. For one, Gyökeres is, if he's not 27 now, he's 27 this year. Højlund's a good, 5 years younger? 5, 6 years younger? So he's going to develop into something. Plus, he's not been playing in a side that's been set up to create chances for him. So if we can set up to create chances for him, I think you're looking at an exponentially better striker. We definitely need proper competition for him because Xerxes, from what we've seen, he's not a striker unless Amorim can coach him differently. But yeah, so on that point, the players are there. So this doesn't quite, for me, fit in the same way as Ten Hag going, because we've been playing so. For me, it was we've been playing such a counter-attacking style of football that when Ten Hag came in, and as he said himself, we talked about at the start, he wanted to bring a possession-based football, but you knew he was going to have to tweak it to play a bit more direct. And you thought, yeah, it's going to be harder to play a possession-orientated style of football with the way this squad evolved. So I got that, but I think this squad's in a good position for Amorim to come in and take over. Next, the second point is we need to try something else anyway, because what we're doing at the moment is not working. Don't think you're going to find anyone out there who said what we've been doing over the past, since the start of this season into last season, has been working for us. So it's not as if you're coming in and you're trying to rip up something that's been working well. Yeah, I think that point speaks for itself. Come in, try something new. You are not going to get pushback from the fans for trying a new system. And then the third point is one of the things that Amorim said, which is you can't do it at Manchester United. He said you can't be defensive. You don't want to be defensive. You don't want to be that defensive. And I get it, because you saw it against Man City. Once you have that sort of 3-4-2-1 and you have to go into a defensive structure, it becomes a 5-4-1. There's a really good video out on the 4-4-2 at the moment talking about how what he's doing in some ways is not too dissimilar to what a lot of the top managers are doing out there. For example, Pep going with a system that falls back into a 4-4-2. But you obviously, in parts of play, you will have defenders so it'll become a three at the back, essentially, because one of your defenders pushes into centre midfield. Whereas the way that Amorim does it with this structure, it becomes more sort of round pegs in round holes, if you like, or square pegs in square holes. People, are more suited to their positions. You're not trying to adapt anyone. But it does mean that when you fall into a defensive structure, you're not sort of switching a player from one position to another. You just fall back into a 5-4-1, ultimately. But what I'd say to that at the moment is, yes, in the long game, we don't want to be that defensive. But it's something that works for you now. We've just seen you beat Manchester City with this system. And yeah, you could argue it's not going to work against all teams in the Premier League in terms of not winning games. I'll come back to that in a sec. Just in terms of, if you were a counter-attacking team and you play primarily in a 5-4-1 and looking to burst forward into your 3-4-2-1, then you look at yourself as being a defensive team. But they take the game to most teams in Portugal playing this way. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think it sets you up quite well for the big games, as we saw with Sporting beating City. So if I was Amorim, I wouldn't be worrying about us being too defensive. Maybe he's just trying to be cautious and, lay some sort of foundations there to, he's not talking about a total abandonment of his system, but it does worry me when he talks about not being able to play this way. It's almost like, hold on, guys, I'm not even set up remotely like this. I just want to prepare you for that. And I think that'd be a massive, massive error of judgment. But yeah, I'd just say this to conclude. I'd just say this to Ruben. I'd say, look, the general structure you've put together has been massively successful. Yes, you might have to adapt for this league. There might have to be little tweaks, just as when he brought in Gyökeres at Sporting the season previous, and they switched to a slightly, a more direct style of play from what people have been saying. So that's a reasonable adjustment there. You're not, completely transforming your game based around one play, but you are making tweaks to make your side more effective to get the best out of that player. Little tweaks like that are fine, not suddenly switching to a 4-4-2, for example. But don't make Ten Hag's mistake and abandon the things that made you successful in the first place. That's all I want to say, Ruben. Don't abandon your principles. Everybody else, subscribe, put your comments in below. I'm sure there's things you might agree with, things you disagree with, and you might want to go and check out the video just there. There and thereabouts.